Boker Tov, Chavirim, and welcome to this week's Heartfelt Haftarah. We're going to be focusing on the Haftarah for uh, the portion Emor in the book of Leviticus, and our portion will be coming from Ezekiel, from a section of chapter 44, where Ezekiel is deeply immersed in talking about the imagined future temple and the imagined future priesthood that will be restored after we return to the land of Israel, which he is absolutely confident we will do. Remember, we are currently, as from his perspective, currently in the Babylonian exile, but he is confident that we will be restored. And it's probably that confidence that got him into the Hebrew Bible in the first place, because he turns out to be right. So anyway, let's start with tent peg stuff. And, I've talked to you about Ezekiel before. He is not only a prophet, he is a priest. He was probably carried into Babylonian exile very young. He may never have functioned as a priest in his entire lifetime. So imagining what the priesthood would be like in the future is, a fantasy. Some of us imagine being basketball players, and we never will. And some of us imagine being priests, even though we never will. But in any case, we've talked about Ezekiel a bit already. So, what I'd like to talk about is actually the priesthood, or as we know them in Hebrew, Kohanim. And yes, the name Cohen, Katz, Khan, Kaplan, all come from, are derived, those surnames are all derived from the idea that those particular families are of priestly descent. So the interesting thing about the Kohanim and the whole idea of the Israelite priesthood is that its history is kind of wobbly. Now, if you read in the book of Leviticus, which we're reading right now, you get the impression that Aaron and his children, and therefore the clan of Aaron, will be the priests for all time. But then, if we move forward into a couple of the historical books of early Israelite history, like the book of Judges and even the book of Joshua, it's not at all clear that the Israelites are using priests or Kohanim to perform their sacrifices. We have the very extraordinary story in 1 Samuel of how the prophet Samuel, who is an Ephraimite, he is not descended from the Levites or from Aaron, performs priestly functions at different times. So something's going on, and we're not completely clear on it. And there are many divisions within biblical scholars about when the priesthood, as we and Ezekiel understand it, was established. The most popular culprit time is during the reign of David, where we see that there is a priesthood, but there are different branches, and that over time, David establishes one particular figure, Zadok, as his court priest. And from that point on, it seems like the descendants of Zadok are going to be the sole clan of Aaron, which are going to be recognized as priests who can make offerings in the temple. So there seems to be, even though we're ambiguous about when the institution started, it seems that by the monarchy, that there was a set group of people by inheritance of a particular clan of Aaron who are the sole people entitled to hold the sacrificial priesthood and to become high priests. So there's a sort of narrowing down, a dynastic quality to what happens. And before that, we don't know exactly what was going on, and there are any number of interpretations. So just be aware. Um, Politics, probably. It's very hard to avoid politics in any field. And, well, what do we talk about these days? We talk about uh, um, Nepo babies, uh, uh, about nepotism. And we refer to it specifically in relationship to Hollywood. How many performers, people we see on the screen, people we see on television, are in fact the children or grandchildren of actors and performers. It's in many ways, Hollywood is a dynastic system, and it's hard to break in if you're not the son of Tom Hanks, or you're not the daughter of Uma Thurman, right? And probably the same thing is going on here. Eventually, the priesthood, which was originally probably a much more flexible institution in its early stages, becomes something much more dynastic. So that's tent pegs, so that you understand. Of course, bring back the tent peg just for a moment. The priesthood is no longer a functional institution. While we may know who is descended from the priesthood, who is Douglas Fairbanks Sr.'s great granddaughter, that doesn't matter. And that doesn't mean they're going to get access to Hollywood. And likewise, we have many priests' descendants among us, but they have no function at this point in Jewish life. So tent peg goes back out again. All right, so let's talk about the portion. The portion, I have to say, is not terribly exciting. I'm going to basically expound on one word because it's a pretty much a laundry list of what to expect from a future priest, which is very similar to what we see in the book of Leviticus. The uniform they're going to wear, the rules by which they can marry, who may and who may not be a priest. Everything that appears in Leviticus is pretty much reiterated here with a little bit of elaboration. But the phrase I really want to focus on is this one. V'hayita lachem nachala ani nachtem v'achu tchseh. All right, which simply translates as, this shall be their portion, for I am their portion. So nachala means portion. Now, oftentimes it's translated as inheritance or heritage, and there's really two terms, nachala and moresha. Moresha is an inheritance the way we think about it today. That is a material inheritance. All right. So I'm going to leave you my property. I'm going to leave you my estate, my high-rise buildings and all the rentals that come with it, et cetera, et cetera. Most of us don't get to do much of that. We may leave a few $100,000, an investment portfolio to our children, but that's about it. That's a moresha. A nachala, which could be translated as a heritage, or in this particular case, I think portion, is something different. The priests in ancient times did not have any claim on the land. Each of the tribes was given their assigned territory, and each of the clans and families would have their chunk of that territory, which they could farm and would be their productive, their way of living. The priests didn't have that. the priests had to depend on other Israelites making offerings. So they had no land of their own. So who is their portion? Their portion is God, who by the priestly system offers them a way of sustenance. So we are not priests, but I do think there is some analogy to be made between Jews who live in the land of Israel, which are about half of us, and Jews who live in the diaspora, which is about the other half of us. And for some of us, those Jews who live in the land is a moresha. It is their inheritance. They live there, they work there, they derive their sustenance from the land of Israel. And I think this is an important and frankly celebratory thing to remember, because I'm recording this on the eve of Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. You and I, however, are more like the priests. We are part of the Jewish people, but we don't currently claim anything in the land of Israel. We live in the diaspora. Any property we own here. So we don't really have the same level of moresha as our Israeli cousins and co-religionists. But what we do have is nachala. God is our portion. God, of course, is the portion of all Israel. And in some ways, I would say that takes priority. The land is not unimportant. The Jews have always considered the land of Israel to be central to our identity and important, and a vision for what our future holds. I'm not dismissing any of that. But the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of us have lived outside the land and without the land for millennia, centuries, a long time. And yet what we have is the nachala, the portion of God that God has given us. And so we should take pride in that portion. We should realize that it doesn't necessarily bring us material benefits, but it brings us endless spiritual benefits. We should rejoice in those benefits. We should celebrate them. If we're going to talk in property terms, we should develop the interest that comes with the nachala of being God's portion. So invest in your Jewish identity, invest in Jewish life, because that's our nachala, and it will never go away. So we are, in a sense, like the ancient priesthood. We live at the pleasure of God, but that has proven to be an enduring portion, an enduring inheritance for us. And we celebrate the people who live in the land, but we got our portion also. All right, take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week.